In this video, I want to give you an overview of the dowel joint. If I had to choose one and only one woodworking joint to use for the rest of my life, it would be this one because it's so versatile. You can make tiny little dowel joints. You can make great, big, heavy dowel joints that are pretty much as strong as a mortise and tenon joint, which is kind of the ultimate in woodworking joint strength. A dowel joint is nothing more than a regular butt joint, which is where two pieces of wood join like this. So it's not really joining in a sense, but they come together like this. But what makes the joint strong is that inset into holes in the pieces of wood are dowels, these little things right here. It spans the gap, it connects one to the other, and it makes things very strong. It's also an invisible joint in that you can't see how it's put together because all these dowels are hidden in the final analysis. But I just want to show you how it works, and we're actually going to join this piece of wood with this piece of wood. So, I mean, you can imagine this sort of situation could be found in many different projects. If you were making a bed, for instance, a headboard for a bed, this thicker piece of wood here could be the leg that goes down, and then this thinner piece of wood could be part of the actual frame that makes up the headboard. Just one example. You can make butt joints like this. You can put them together like this in terms of a box. You can join them together on their edge. They can be the same thickness. They can be different thicknesses. It's really very, very adjustable, we'll say. And the only trick, and it's not really much of a trick, is that you need to drill holes precisely. As you'd imagine, if we have this dowel here going into a hole in this piece of wood, and we have another dowel going into another hole further down in the piece of wood, well, for these two to connect together, the two pairs of holes need to line up exactly. There can't be any room for variation there, especially between one dowel and the next, because it's got to come together. So the key, the secret, I guess if you can call it, to dowel joint accuracy and to really having some fun with dowel joints is a dowel jig. This is really a drilling jig because it guides the travel of a drill bit so that the hole you drill is perfectly square to the face you're working on, and one hole matches exactly with the other. So this is a dowel jig. This is my favorite dowel jig. There's a handful of them that are made in the world, but this is a great jig, designed and built in Canada. It's been around for a long time. There are other options, but I don't think there's anything that is as good as this. Let me just give you a demonstration here, just before we get going. These holes here, they're designed to guide a drill bit. They quite precisely match the size of the drill bit. And the jig will clamp to a piece of wood like this. I'll go over to the bench in a minute and we'll actually use this thing, but this jig can clamp to pieces of wood in different configurations. But right now, these holes here line up with the middle of this 3/4 inch thick piece of wood, and that's exactly what we want. Now in this case, the dowel jig is wider than the piece of wood, so we're not going to be using the outer holes because only half of that hole would be in a piece of wood. But I'm going to use this hole and this hole. I'm going to drill that. We're going to insert a dowel. We're also going to take this jig and use it in the same way to drill corresponding holes into the other piece of wood that it mates with. I think you're going to be really pleased with how it all goes together. Before we go over to the bench, I just want to point out a few things. These dowel pins here come ready to use. This is the way you buy them. And you might wonder, well, can't I buy lengths of dowel, sort of round cylinders of wood like this, but longer? Maybe I could cut them to length and save a little money. You could. The problem is the quality of dowel in the form of long dowel rods is not all that great. Typically, the wood that's used, it is a hardwood, but it's a fairly soft and weak tropical hardwood, so it's not the strongest. The shape of these ready-made dowel rods is not perfectly round, generally, and they're often undersized, so they're going to wiggle a little bit, even in the size of hole that they're supposed to fit into. Dowel pins are entirely different. Besides being cut to length and having their ends chamfered so that they can enter into the hole easily, the outer surface is compressed. That's what these ridges are for. This is called a fluted dowel, and the compression you see here are the flutes. So notice how they're angled, so that provides more resistance to pulling out. The grooves trap glue, so that when you drive this into the hole, you're not cleaning off all the glue from the dowel. There's significant glue trapped in the bottom of the flutes, so it's going to be stronger. And also, when they were making these, the wood was compressed. It's compressed to make these flutes, which means that when water-based glue hits these flutes, the wood is going to expand because it was compressed before. So it's going to drink in some water, it's going to expand, and it's just going to be a very nice, tight, strong fit into the wood, and that's exactly what you want. There are different sizes. This is 3/8 of an inch. Another common size is 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch diameter. Now, as you might imagine, if you're going to be using different size of dowels, you need to have different size guides because the guide has to fit the bit because the bit fits the dowel. So this is the 3/8 inch guide, and they come right out in the Dowel Max design. And let's say I wanted to use some 1/4 inch dowels, a little smaller in diameter. Well, this is just going to screw right in there. So I can reconfigure this. Let's say I wanted to go bigger. Well, Dowel Max makes a block like this that's got 1/2 inch diameter bushings in it. So the bushings are made out of steel, hardened steel. The jig is made out of aluminum. Aluminum wouldn't really work very well for the drilling guide because it's soft and it would soon get too big. But these hardened steel bushings last a long time. You might need to replace them eventually, but it would be a very long eventually. So that, as I was saying before, there's all kinds of options here, but there's nothing like actually seeing a dowel joint being made. So let's go over to the bench. I've got some clamps there, as you've seen, some features of the bench that can hold wood while you're working on it, and we'll make this dowel joint. So here the drilling jig is clamped to the workpiece, and I'm going to put the workpiece in this tail vise here, and I'm going to start drilling. But before I start drilling, I need to find something out. I need to know how deep to drill a hole. I'm going to be using 2-inch dowels on this, which means I want 1 inch in this piece of wood, and I want the other half of each dowel pin, the other 1 inch, in the side here. So I have to drill 1 inch deep, at least 1 inch deep. If I don't drill deep enough, and the dowel pin is longer than the sum of the two holes that work together, then that joint isn't going to come together. Simple enough. And I can't just guess how deep the hole is. I need to know. So I'm measuring this dowel pin. It's 2 inch. As I said, a 2-inch dowel pin. So 1 inch is halfway. I want to drill a hole a little bit deeper than 1 inch because I need a little bit of clearance at the end to make sure that the dowel doesn't bottom out. Now, one way of adjusting the depth of dowel holes is with a collar like this. I'm going to put an Allen key in here to loosen it. You can move it to different positions. With something like this properly adjusted, you simply cannot drill too deep. But you don't really need a collar like that necessarily. All you need to do is to mark your drill bit. So I've got it in here, it's touching the wood now, and I want to drill a little bit more than 1 inch deep. So I'm just going to mark this. Another way to do it is to put piece of black electrical tape around here, so you can kind of see it flapping around. So I'm all set. I haven't chucked the drill bit into the drill yet, but if you remember, I don't want to drill the outside holes because my piece of wood isn't wide enough for that. I'm going to drill these 2 holes right here, and I think that's going to be sufficient. We'll take a look later. Maybe I might want to do the middle one too. We'll just see how it looks. So the drill bit just goes in the drill. This is called the chuck. I'm tightening it up, and I'm ready to get going. So I really don't need to do anything because this is, except pull the trigger and push down on the drill. But the beauty of the drilling jig is it keeps it all square and precise. Can you see the mark there? I'm coming close to as deep as I want to get. Almost there. There we go. Now it's winter. It's been winter where I am for a long time now. There's our nice holes, very precise. It's been winter a long time, and in Canada in winter, because we heat our homes, the air tends to get quite dry. Same in my shop, it's heated just the same as a home. So my guess is that this dowel is not going to have any trouble going in the hole. The reason I mention it is because if this had been summertime and we'd have several months of humid weather, the dowel pin would have swollen, and it probably wouldn't go into the hole unless I heated the dowel for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour in a toaster oven. That actually does a really good job at shrinking down dowel pins. Now let's just see. Oh, well, it's just about perfect. It's just about perfect. It's a nice snug fit. There's no slop there, but I did get it in, so this is actually just about perfect right now. It's time to create holes on the other piece of wood, and you'll notice it's thicker. It's thicker than this piece of wood, so if I just simply, say, opened the jig up here and clamped it on, I would get some nice matching holes if I drilled in here, but they would not be centered in this piece of wood. And maybe that's what I want. So the holes are here. If I drilled like this, the 2 pieces of wood would be flush on this side, and then there would be a step on the other side. And for some applications, that's probably what you want. For this demonstration, I would like to have the thin piece of wood centered in the thickness of the thick piece of wood. And to make that happen, I'm going to have to put in a spacer. This just shows you the versatility of the Dowel Max jig. I have no reason to recommend it, except I've followed its story for a long time. Invented by a Scottish immigrant to Canada who needed to build some furniture for his family when he got here, didn't have any money, built a bunch of furniture out of the shipping crates that their stuff arrived in, and he after that went on to design and build and sell this jig. So quite a nice story. But so I want something like this. I want it more or less centered. So I need to find a spacer that's going to do the job there. So let me go and take a look at my spacer collection, and we'll come back and get this all set up for the drilling here. So if you come and take a look here, you can see some spacers that I've installed in order to center the holes in this wider piece of wood. So a couple of aluminum plates here. That wasn't quite enough, so I've added some washers down below. It's quite close to being centered. I'll just lock that in. I'm going to lock the jig to the wood now. So once you get this far, as you can see, the dowel jig kind of does all the hard part for you. So going to keep our eye on our black marks. One's there and one's there and one's there. Drilling these 2 holes because that matches the holes that we saw that we drilled before. There's a black mark. Now, if I've done this right, if I haven't made any mistakes, this should come together quite nicely. Oh, a little bit of a problem. Let's turn it around and see if that helps. Yeah, one of these dowel holes is not deep enough. You can see it's that one there. That's why it's very important to do dry fitting, because things can happen sometimes. And you want to know about problems before you get involved in glue, because, well, especially with dowel joints, once you put the glue on there, the dowel start to swell, and it's very likely you won't get it apart again. So. That's better. So a nice tight joint. I've dry fitted it. If this was any kind of a complicated project, I'd be clamping this up dry, just to make sure it really does come together perfectly. But I can see that it's working fine with a simple installation like this. So all that remains to be done is applying some glue and some clamping pressure, and that's what I want to show you next. So at this stage, I want to show you how to glue up a dowel joint. And this applies to any kind of dowel joint that you're going to want to do. I'm going to be using some wood glue here. I do want to say a few words about wood glue though. I mean, you can go to any store and you can get a kind of a white wood glue, and it's going to work okay. But I'm always big on doing the best job you can, using the best materials you can. And there is a whole class of wood glues, which are generically called cabinet makers glues. This is one I really like here. This is made by Lee Valley Tools. That's where I buy this. They call it their 2002 GF glue. The GF stands for gap filling, and that's what I'm using. It's thicker, it's stronger. Lab tests show it's stronger. Not that regular white wood glue is weak enough that it's going to cause a problem, but why not have the strongest glues you can? The trick with dowel joints is that you want to get glue all the way around in the holes and on the dowel before it goes together. And you're going to need 2 little tools for that. I like to use one of these bamboo skewers to work the glue around the hole. So we're just going to inject some glue here. Don't want to do too much, but we do want enough that it wets the whole inside of the hole. I'm sure I can see better than you can right now, but the whole inside is nice and wet right now. And I also want to put some glue on the dowel. It's not enough for me to just squirt it on though. I want to work it into the flutes a little bit. This is a plumber's flux brush. This is designed for spreading acid paste on pipes and things that you're soldering. There we go. There's that one in place. They're very cheap. You can, they're 25 cents each or something crazy like that, and they do a terrific job spreading glue on small parts like this. So good. I'm not going to wait too long because I want to get this joint together as fast as possible. If I wait too long, there's always the possibility that the dowel won't engage all the way because the glue is going to start to grab. It's not a huge danger, but you do want to keep it in mind. Generally, gluing up woodworking projects is something that you want to get to quickly. For large projects, it's of a benefit to even have a second pair of hands, even a third pair of hands sometimes, and have all your parts dry fitted together so there's no ugly surprises with things not coming together properly. Now notice I'm not putting a whole lot of glue here on the actual mating face. And that's because there's not much point in doing that. Because wood is funny. We can glue something to that edge grain quite well. But end grain, which is what this is here, will never be held very securely by glue. So let's just, this should come together quite nicely. Yeah, there we go. And clamping up. You always clamp up a joint. It's going to make for much stronger results. Now, I intentionally put on a little bit too much glue because I want to talk about that. But before I do, I want to say a few words about clamps. You will enjoy having clamps in your woodworking space. Clamps can be fairly expensive though. And the best value you can get in a clamp is what's called a pipe clamp, which is what this is here. This is an ordinary 3/4 inch thick steel pipe. You can get them at big box stores. You'll want to get the end threaded. See, in this end of the pipe is threaded. You just buy the pipe separately. It just comes on its own in different lengths. And this and this are purchased separately. This screws onto the pipe. This slides onto the pipe. And together you can get some really great clamping action, and it's going to cost you not too much money. It's certainly the least expensive of the large clamping options. So, squeeze out. That's another thing to talk about. Squeeze out's a big thing in the woodworking world. You might be tempted to wipe that off right now, just like it is. That would be a mistake. And that's because that squeeze out, it will stain the wood. If you try to wipe it away, it's going to stain the wood. And it's going to make that wood very, very light after you try to finish it, especially if you try to finish it with a stain. Because the glue has sealed the surface, so the stain is not contacting the wood, so you get nice bright wood where the glue was or where you wiped it, and a dark color everywhere else. So there's a couple of options. The one I like to use pretty much all the time is to ignore that and just wait until it gets half hard. And then we can scrape that glue out and minimize the amount of discoloration that it causes. If I was assembling this as a finished project, I probably would have pre-finished these pieces of wood. Maybe not completely, but let's say I'm going to be coating this in urethane. It would have been very wise for me to give these parts one coat of urethane first and then the glue up, because then the wood is sealed, it's protected. The glue can't soak into the wood. So I could have wiped that off with a damp rag, and it would not have stained the wood with that first coat of finish in place. So I'll just clean this up as best I can. This is just a mock-up, but the squeeze out here did give me a chance to explain to you that dealing with glue squeeze out is a pretty big part of neat woodworking. If you don't deal with it properly, you're going to get substandard results in the area of joints. And it's just because the glue soaks into the wood and causes discoloration once you've gotten around to finishing it. With glue like this, you should probably leave the parts clamped up for, I don't know, an hour at least. Now, it's not going to be full strength after an hour. It's probably going to take at least 24 hours, maybe even longer, to get to be full strength. But an hour is long enough for the parts to grab. So if you need your clamps for some other purpose, you've got them. And just be gentle with the parts as you take them out. But there's dowel joinery for you. If we had been using dowel joints on the stool, the difference that it makes would be there would be no visible fastener heads. So it's a kind of a neater and more refined appearance. And because we were dealing with 1.5-inch thick wood there, I would have gone with 1/2-inch diameter dowels and 1.5-inch long, maybe 2 inches long. Either of those lengths would work fine. But the dowel joint could have been used for the footstool. And as I've said before, if you're just tooling up, you want to maybe fill your house with furniture or part of it, and you don't want to spend a lot of money on tooling up, I would recommend spending it on a doweling jig because it's going to give you so much versatility. You can basically fill your house with furniture put together with nothing but dowel joints.